I would also like to acknowledge the fact that on my father's side, I'm a proud Kamilaroi and Barkindji woman, and on my mother's side, a proud Ballajung and Whadjuk woman. And it's been a privilege for me to be able to grow in this country and to present here today. If I could get you all to close your eyes. I want you to imagine yourself as a grade 12 high school student. You're 2 months away from graduation, and you get called into the guidance counsellor's office. The door opens, you walk in, you sit down, and the guidance counsellor turns to you and says, "So, what do you want to do after high school?" And you turn around as the eager grade 12 student you are and say, "I want to go to university." And the guidance counsellor turns to you and says, "Well, university's hard to get into. What else do you have in mind?" Open your eyes. That was me this time 5 years ago. I had peers who questioned me and my Aboriginality, and I had people that didn't want the best for me. But what was the difference between me and some of those other kids? I could go home to both my parents, who were first in their families to go to university, even though they had a grade 10 level of education. They embedded the importance of education to my siblings and I. And they knew that the key to our success as a family was through education. So in 2010, as a grade 9 high school student, I walked into the AIM doors on this very university, QUT. I walked into a space that made me feel incredibly uncomfortable, a space that challenged and pushed me, but also a space where everyone was supportive and allowed me to be whoever I wanted to be. But most importantly, they allowed me to imagine what was possible instead of telling me what was impossible. So as a 14, 15-year-old kid, I knew where I wanted to work. I knew that if I could become anything, it would be to become another support mechanism for an Indigenous kid just like me. Because if they had no one at home or at school, or even if they did, I could support them too. I fought incredibly hard to work for the company at AIM. And after a few attempts, in my second year of university, I came on board to work for the Brisbane team. And I can tell you it's been an incredible journey ever since.
Because I love New Orleans. I was born and raised here. I spent my formative years here, and like you, while I was living here, I only did laundry 6 times. When I finished school, I was completely lost, and by school I mean middle school, but I went ahead and finished high school anyway, and I had no ambition. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I did everything from I shucked oysters, I was a hostess, I was a bartender, I was a waitress, I painted houses, I sold vacuum cleaners. I had no idea. And I thought I'd just finally settle on some job and I would make enough money to pay my rent, maybe have basic cable, maybe not. I didn't really have a plan. My point is that by the time I was your age, I really thought I knew who I was, but I had no idea. Like, for example, when I was your age, I was dating men. So what I'm saying is, when you're older, most of you will be gay. Is anybody writing this stuff down? Parents? Anyway, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and the way I ended up on this path was from a very tragic event. I was maybe 19, and my girlfriend at the time was killed in a car accident. And I passed the accident, and I didn't know it was her, and I kept going. And I found out shortly after that it was her. And I was living in a basement apartment. I had no money. I had no heat, no air. I had a mattress on the floor, and the apartment was infested with fleas. And I was soul searching. I was like, why is she suddenly gone and there are fleas here? I don't understand. There must be a purpose, and wouldn't it be so convenient if we could just pick up the phone and call God and ask these questions? And I started writing, and what poured out of me was an imaginary conversation with God, which was one-sided. And I finished writing it, and I looked at it, and I said to myself, and I hadn't even been doing stand-up ever. There was no club in town. I said, I'm going to do this on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. At the time, he was the king. And I'm going to be the first woman in the history of the show to be called over to sit down. And several years later, I was the first woman in the history of the show, and only woman in the history of the show, to sit down because of that phone conversation with God that I wrote. And I started this path of stand-up, and it was successful, and it was great, but it was hard because I was trying to please everybody, and I had this secret that I was keeping, that I was gay, and I thought if people found out, they wouldn't like me, they wouldn't laugh at me. Then my career turned into, I got my own sitcom, and that was very successful, another level of success, and I thought, what if they find out I'm gay, then they'll never watch, and this was a long time ago. This was when we just had white presidents, but anyway.
When I was about 8 years old, I first heard about something called climate change or global warming. Apparently that was something humans had created by our way of living. I was told to turn off the lights to save energy and to recycle paper to save resources. I remember thinking that it was very strange that humans, who are an animal species among others, could be capable of changing the Earth's climate. Because if we were, and if it was really happening, we wouldn't be talking about anything else. As soon as you turn on the TV, everything would be about that. Headlines, radio, newspapers. You would never read or hear about anything else, as if there was a world war going on. But no one ever talked about it. If burning fossil fuels was so bad that it threatened our very existence, how could we just continue like before? Why were there no restrictions? Why wasn't it made illegal? To me, that did not add up. It was too unreal. So when I was 11, I became ill. I fell into depression. I stopped talking, and I stopped eating. In 2 months, I lost about 10 kilos of weight. Later on, I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, OCD, and selective mutism. That basically means I only speak when I think it's necessary. Now was one of those moments. For those of us who are on the spectrum, almost everything is black or white. We aren't very good at lying, and we usually don't enjoy participating in the social game that the rest of you seem so fond of. I think in many ways that we autistic are the normal ones, and the rest of the people are pretty strange. Especially when it comes to the sustainability crisis, where everyone keeps saying that climate change is an existential threat and the most important issue of all, and yet they just carry on like before.